Sir Richard,
Yeah.
let's go back to your days in the RAF.
Good
You were
gracious.
in the film unit and did
was.
some reconnaissance missions over Germany.
I was.
What do you remember of those
Being
experiences?
sick. You didn't have things like pressurized cabins, you know, or, I mean, you were out in the open because the guns and so on at the back of the plane were open to the world. There was no question of pressurized cabins, and they didn't have anything to deal with air sickness. And I was actually an air gunner cameraman, so that I had a camera where normally the people had guns, and we would go over the target and photograph a target. Then we'd go up above an orbit while the bombers went in, and then you came back down and photographed what they'd done. And the business of reloading, we had cameras called IMOs, 100-foot IMOs, so you could only shoot a certain amount, and you had to reload these cameras. But because you were out in the open, you had to have oxygen masks. So if you can imagine the problem of reloading your camera with an oxygen mask on, which you had to keep taking off because you were being sick and putting on again, it was not my happiest experience. I'd rather fly in Concorde.
You've worked with some extremely well-known actors,
Yeah.
huge stature. Now, you worked with John Wayne in Brannigan.
Yeah.
What do you remember of those experiences?
He was the consummate professional. He knew exactly what he was going to do before he came on the set. He knew his lines backwards. He had very firm ideas as to how he wanted it to be shot. Don't photograph me from here, this is how I like to do this, etc., etc., etc. And my respect and affection for him was profound. I mean, was very deep. I absolutely disagreed with him politically. I mean, he was the opposite almost to what I am. But that was not part of our work. Our work was making the movie, and outside, I wouldn't like to have met him in a dark alley, you know, if we were opposing views. But no, he was a great chap.
I've often wondered, when movies are made, when movies that become film classics, if people realize at the time that they're going to be classic films. When you did The Great Escape,
Yeah.
was the attitude on the set that this is just another war film?
Yeah. I mean, it was. It was just a group of guys. It was very interesting, a group from the US, a group from the UK, headed by Steve and Charlie Bronson and Jim Garner and so on from the United States, and people like Jimmy Donald and so on, and Gordon Jackson, myself from London. No, we were just there to make an adventure story. Nobody believed that 30 years later, Great Escape would still be one of the classic moments on television.
Now, you recently had a starring role in a film that's become the most successful film in movie history. What kind of humorous type of feedback did you get from people after you did that film?
I don't know about a great deal of humorous feedback. I mean, people laugh at the thought of my doing a movie like this when I haven't acted for 14 or 15 years. Most important thing about Jurassic Park was you will learn in decades to come, when you too are a grandfather, the most important thing is to find the respect of your grandchildren. Now, it's very difficult to do that. But boy, if you play in Jurassic Park, you suddenly have a stature in the grandchildren's generation, which you never dreamt of. That was the most important thing for me on Jurassic Park.
I'm doing a story on the Academy Awards about the mechanics of a lot of the events. Now, I know when you win an Oscar, it's not engraved. How do you go about getting your name engraved on a statue?
Well, you just hand it back. They grab it from you. You don't keep it at all. I mean, we were very lucky when we all won the Oscars for Gandhi. They put somebody, because we were all going back to the United Kingdom, they put somebody on overtime or something, and they engraved them all over the night so that we could take them back home with us. But normally you don't keep it at all. You hand it back, and they then put the plaque on it.
I went to university in Los Angeles, and our school had a lot of movies filming on campus. A lot of restrictions were put on movie companies. When you went to Oxford, what kind of restrictions did they put on you?
None. They were terrific. I was very lucky. I was chairman of the British Film Institute for about 10 years, and during the majority of that period, the director of the British Film Institute, a man called Anthony Smith, who, when he retired from the Institute, became the president of Magdalen College, Oxford. So I had an immediate friendship and openness with the authorities in Oxford. I also know the Chancellor of Oxford, Lord Jenkins, and so on. So I had people there who I knew, who, if I may be allowed to say so, who had a respect for me to the extent that I would not take advantage of the facilities that were offered. And provided we didn't interfere with the studies, which was very important of the undergraduates, we had the total freedom of Magdalen College in particular and Oxford as a whole.
Some places when you film, people will shout, passerbyers, spectators will shout at the company, and they're very much a party atmosphere. Now, how blasé were the students at Oxford when you were on location
They
there?
were terrific. They accepted very much what we were doing. It was explained to them in great detail what we wanted to do. But apart from anything else, you see, the atmosphere that exists now at university has obviously emanated from the total sea change that took place in the 60s. The 60s changed everybody's life. They changed all the values that we all had and so on. And prior to the 60s, there was an inhibition and a constraint and a sort of ludicrous pomposity born of supposed erudition and scholarship and so on, which was totally ludicrous. I came from that background. My father was the head of a university, and it was nonsense. And what happened, of course, was that this marvelous character, Joy Gresham, this feisty, abrasive New York divorcee, came in and blew the whole place sideways. But the students understood that since we were shooting a subject 40 years ago, they couldn't behave in the way that they would now. So that, in a way, created inhibition and created constraint, which might have been more difficult in the circumstances that you were suggesting if it hadn't been 50 years ago, 40 years ago.